Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now it's a bit of a waffling channel, this one, because we're talking a bit about we've got a problem with the Vauxhall Corsa, but also just to go over a few other things going on the channel. So that's coming up this time. So what's going on? Well, we've got a water leak on the Vauxhall Corsa. This is the one that my daughter drives, and if you remember, fairly recently we also did the water pump on this one, and at first I thought, is it the water pump leaking? Has the gasket not sealed? Something like that. Have I not fastened something back together? Which was my first thought. But luckily, no, it's not that. The thermostat itself, and that's kind of where I want to talk about, because I've had a few people in the comments mention, why are you explaining how to do these things when you don't always know what you're talking about? It's a fair point, to be honest. I don't know what I'm talking about. As you probably guess, I just work it out as I go along, and I shoot it on YouTube because some people find it useful, some people don't. If you don't, let me know. I don't mind getting negative and positive comments, you know, that's kind of how it works. But I thought I'd have a little think about, why exactly do I do this? Why do I talk about cars and electronics and things like that and put them on the channel? Well, it's because it's an interest of mine. And it's not my day job. Some people have said, are you a mechanic as a regular job or anything like that? I don't do mechanics, I don't do electrical, I don't do electronics, I don't do any of that. I work in IT, I'm a network engineer for an internet provider. So this is completely different to my day job, and that's why I enjoy it, and that's why I do it. So I kind of want to address that and say, well, yes, I put a lot of how-to videos. Maybe I'm going to stop doing the how-to guide videos and do more videos like this, which is where I know I need to fix something. I'm not going to talk you through it all the way through. I'm just going to mention what I'm doing and probably have a bit of a chat at the same time. So if you think that's the right way to go with the channel, put a comment down the bottom, let me know, pop a like on. Or if you don't, let me know, because I like all the feedback, and I will respond to the feedback, positive or negative, because that's the point of this. That's the difference between being able to do this on YouTube as opposed to doing it on regular TV or any other sort of channels. I get the chance to talk through stuff. So when we have a problem like this, we get to fix it and we get to have a look into it, and I certainly don't hide any of those aspects either, you know. If we have a problem, or if I have a fault with a car, I try and fix it and it goes wrong, you'll find out about that as well, because there'll be another video that comes along that tells you that it hasn't worked. Take my Vauxhall Zafira for example, the problems that I had with the EGR and the DPF and things like that. You saw that progress over the years, and I pretty much had it. I thought it was reasonably solved and I was quite happy with it, but it was time for a change, and that was why I then went on to the XC60. And I've got to admit, the change between an XC60 and the old Zafira, there's no comparison at all. I love that XC60. That is a great car, and actually I've had a little bit of work done to that recently, so might be talking about that. Might talk about that a little bit later in this video, since this is a kind of chattering video. But before I completely lose track of what I'm on about, the problem that we had, so my daughter let me know that she had an engine light come on And actually I'm going to show you the engine lights first, because the engine lights on the Vauxhall Corsa are interesting, and it's worth knowing what the different lights actually mean. Let's go in and I'll see if I can show you what I mean. Now on the dashboard, I'm going to turn the ignition on, which is going to put the main dashboard lights on, and then I'm going to try and show you and explain what the different lights actually mean, because they do have very different meanings on the Corsa. It doesn't help that today, of all days, is actually a nice sunny day, so it's quite difficult to see some of the lights. Let's see what happens here, see if we can get them to come on. There we go. So that is giving me the indicators that I want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through them so I can explain what they are, because the key one is the engine with the spanner, and of course the engine light itself. Those two are important because in Vauxhalls they mean different things. You've got the engine, or you've got the car, I should say, with the spanner light. Now, depending on whether that is on, whether it goes off, whether it stays on, or whether it flashes, all have slightly different meanings. So in this case, you see, it comes on as I turn the ignition on, and then after it's done its self-check, it goes out. Now that means that there's no faults logged. There's nothing stored in the ECU, whether it minor, major, anything like that. That is great news. So that means that you've got a completely clear system. Now if that stayed on, it means that a fault has been logged, but it's not necessarily major. So it's one to scan at a future date, I would say. Now if it's on and flashing, it thinks it's a major fault, and you should really take a look into it, stop driving and look into it. Which kind of takes me on to the other thing, which is that one, the traditional engine management light, which that'll go out when I start the car up. Now that one generally means there is a major engine fault, and again should stop driving. But just as I was saying at the start of this video, also this is my interpretation of these. It's based on what's in the manual, it's based on other YouTubers, it's based on information online. So I'm kind of interpreting that. Again, you've probably got your own interpretation of it. This is just as a bit of a guide, a bit of a help, like I say. It's a bit of a chattering video as well, just talking you through what I found. So what happened was that light came on and was on solid when my daughter got to the end of her journey into work. So it meant there was something wrong. She knew there was something wrong, and she rang me, which that makes sense. That's kind of the point of that light. It's telling you something's not right here. And the first thing that I said is, because I knew we'd worked on the coolant recently, go check the coolant. Sure enough, no coolant in the expansion bottle. So we've lost water, we've lost coolant somehow. So the first thing I did is I headed down there, I had a look, and sure enough, no water in the coolant. I then plugged the diagnostics in, had a look at the code, and the code was the code similar to what we had when we did actually have the water pump failure, which was the low coolant flow. Now that's not a major issue in itself, it's not an overheat or anything like that. What it's doing is the car is giving you an early warning saying coolant isn't flowing at the rate it expects. It's got a little flow sensor on it, so it doesn't think coolant is flowing properly through the system, so it's something to check out. Sure enough, water in the expansion bottle, there was none in there. Now I knew that there was water because what I did was I checked this pipe here, and you can kind of feel and hear that there's liquid in there, and also this one, which is the return from the radiator up to the thermostat, and there was water in that one as well. So I knew there was water in the system, just none in the expansion bottle. Now that takes me on to another thing. On a few of these videos I do often say the wrong thing. I do often make a mistake, and I think it was on the water pump change video. I didn't mention that this is actually the thermostat, and I think I said that the thermostat was over here, which I think on some of the other models it is actually, but there is a coolant housing here, which I think I have changed because of a crack on a previous car. Actually, I seem to think I've replaced that one, but that's not where the thermostat lives on this car. That is our thermostat there, and that is actually where we've got our leak. Now, I'm not sure if the camera will show it, but we've actually got a puddle, and you can see a puddle of water on here. That's water on there. And actually when I had a look around at the car, you can see there's a little bit of water on the aircon valve cover there. You can see there's water around that mount, so there's water kind of all over down here, which of course would make sense. I was still thinking, is it the coolant, is it the pump? Has the pump not sealed properly when it's gone in, or have I made a mistake, or something's gone wrong there? Another common one, I believe, is you follow around. I'm trying to think where the other coolant is. It's the heater matrix, but we were dry down there, so I didn't think it was back there. So it went back to here and thought, okay, so if it's the water pump leaking, it's going to be difficult to see, because if you remember in the water pump video, it's kind of hidden right the way back down there. So I filled it up with water, ran the engine for about 5 minutes. I just wanted to see if I could see water leaking out anywhere, any of the usual places down the coolant hoses, whether we've got a hose split, anything like that, and nothing came out initially. Engine temperature was normal. So what we did is we limped the car home, and what I mean by that is I drove it very carefully. So I drove it back home, keeping an eye. I actually had the scanner giving me live data, so I could see the temperature of the coolant, and that's important in two ways. First of all, I wanted to check that the coolant temperature didn't shoot through the sky. Remember the thermostat, I think it was about 108 degrees Celsius, the thermostats on these open, so I knew that anything in that sort of up to 108, 110, 115 range was normal operating temperature. If it went higher than that, then we've got a thermostat not opening or insufficient cooling, something's not happening properly. Similarly, if it dropped, I'd be worrying, because the way that it tells you that the temperature of the coolant is it checks the temperature of the water, the coolant. Now, if the coolant all disappears, the temperature sensor won't see the water, and you'll potentially get the opposite problem. You'll see too low a temperature. So that's always something to watch out for. It's quite difficult on cars that don't have a temperature gauge on the dashboard. I do like a temperature gauge. Unfortunately, pretty much all cars now don't bother with that, do they? Driving it home, and I got it home okay. Temperature sat in normal ranges, that kind of thing. I stopped halfway because I wanted to have a look and see if I could see any water leaking, because again, it must have gone somewhere, and I wanted to see how much was left in the expansion bottle. So I had a look, and actually you can see, because it's still there. That is after I'd filled it back up. You can see we've still got coolant in there, but what I did see is I saw a spurt of coolant coming out from the thermostat housing, so I knew I hadn't sealed the thermostat back on properly. So it's either the gasket on there hasn't worked or hasn't quite sealed. Now, thinking back, I should probably have put some gasket sealant on it, which I didn't do, and I think that's where I've gone wrong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the thermostat off. It's not too bad. It's the 3 Torx. We'll also move these cables out of the way as well. Now, whether I can do it without emptying and flooding all of the coolant out or not, I'm not sure. again, like I say, I just bumble my way through these things and solve problems step by step. So that might not be the right way. I might be supposed to drain the coolant, but this is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to tackle the problem. Simply take those off. I'm not even going to take the hose off. I can't see the point. I'm just going to drop those bolts out, see what happens, and hopefully then check the seal on it. I'm actually going to apply some RTV sealant compound on there and put it back on like that. So that's what I'm going to get on with. Like I said earlier, I'm not doing this as a how-to. I'm simply fixing one of my own cars, and I think that's the important thing to remember, that that's kind of how I do this channel. This is just me fixing my own cars, because I guess it's a hobby of mine, isn't it? You see me quite often out here fixing cars or messing about with electronics. We do have some other electronics and home automation stuff coming up on the channel soon, which you'll see very shortly. Why they use different connectors? So that one, you lift the tab to pull it out. That one, you press the tab to pull it out. That one, you pull the clip out, then press the tab. Why do they all have to be different? I mean, there's much more chance of you snapping one of those and getting it wrong. I sometimes think that's actually why they do it, because they don't want people to do these jobs themselves. They want you to take it into Vauxhall, don't they? Of course they do. Right, okay, so E12 I think it is. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get this big spanner in down there, but let's give it a go. Let's just get them. No, that's not going to fit, that's too big. That's E10 actually, sorry, E10. Let me go and get a smaller set of socket and we'll get in there, shall we? It's not an E10, it's an E11. That's why it didn't fit. There we go. I'm just going to... Actually, I'm going to put the cap on the reservoir. I did just throw water in it, so it does really need some proper coolant put in it. So I'm not too precious about losing the coolant. I'm more bothered that it's going to flood the aircon compressor, which is directly below. Yeah, I think I need an extension on that. So yeah, I'd like to know what you think about what I was saying before, about whether these videos should be how-tos, or whether you prefer more this style of video where I'm just more talking about generally what I'm up to. If it's useful to you, I show you what I'm doing. You can tell me where I'm going wrong. You know, all that kind of good stuff. And if it is useful to you, let me know as well, because it's good to know that the odd thing that I do, you know, has helped you out. I know that I've had a few comments on the work that I did recently on the Nissan Duke. You know, the DPF problem that we had on that one. And I know quite a few people commented on that one and found that quite useful. And that's all I'm doing. I'm enjoying myself. I keep myself busy, do these little car projects. Whether it's actually saving me money or not, I'm not sure. You know, because the amount of time that I take to do something, a professional garage would have done probably in a quarter of the time. You know, they have the advantage of all the workshop manuals and all of the knowledge that's built up over the years. And actually that was something I was going to mention, wasn't it, that that I had the Volvo XC60 into the garage recently. And in hindsight, the job that I got done on the XC60 I could have done myself. So what it was on the XC60 was I thought I was getting some drive shaft noise. I was getting a bit of a clunk when I went round corners slowly. And I thought, you know, that does sound like a drive shaft. It sounds like the coolant's emptying itself here. So I thought I had a drive shaft problem. And looking at it, well, it's a CV joint problem. And on the XC60, it seems to be that you change the entire drive shaft rather than just the CV joint. And I didn't really feel like doing that because it's a big heavy car, big heavy parts, all that kind of stuff. So I thought, you know what, I don't really want to tackle that. So I took it into a garage, and I also thought at the same time of maybe getting the automatic transmission fluid changed, because as you know, it's on 138,000 just clocked over, and it runs good, but I got the occasional transmission blip, let me say. You're on a steep hill and you're on the foot brake, you come off the foot brake, you get a little bit of rollback and then accelerate, and it keeps going, and that just made me think, a little bit of a fluid problem. So I got them to change the fluid. Now they gave me all the usual explanation that it's sealed for life, Volvo don't recommend changing it, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, they're also Volvo specialists in the northeast. So they changed the fluid for me because yes, they agreed that it probably needs doing at this age. So they've done that. The shifts whilst driving, they're great, nice and smooth, seems really good. The only thing is, on a hill, I've noticed it do similar, and changing between reverse and drive, there's also a slight hesitation. So my suspicion is it needs topped up a little bit more with fluid. Now I might end up doing that myself, because looking it over, it's not a difficult task on the XC60. You take the airbox out, so we might end up giving that one a go. But that's what I mean about having a go. It's kind of what I do. I do bits at garages, I take the cars in the garages to get certain things done, but then I do other stuff myself. It's just a bit random, really. So you've probably seen that in between all of my chattering, I've actually got something done. Let me just get the camera in there. You can see the thermostat is out, and actually now I've looked, there isn't much of a gasket on this. There's only a rubber O-ring on it, and then there's no... Now I thought there'd be a metal gasket that would help mate that together, which might explain why that's not a great seal. So I think what I am going to do is I am going to put a bit of sealant on that, dry it off, clean it up, put a bit of sealant on it, put it back on again, and I think that should solve our water leak. This is the sealant. I'm going to use this JB Weld, sets in an hour, and it's temperature resistant up to 343. So the idea is I'm going to put a smear around the metal of the water pump housing itself. Put it back on, nip it up. You don't tighten it all the way, you leave it for an hour first, and then you nip it up. I'm not quite sure how this stuff applies, so let's use the nozzle, shall we? Let's try and get an even squirt, especially around the bolt holes, because I know that that's definitely where you want to get this working. Oh, I need to cut the top off, don't I? Not quite sure how well I'm going to be able to do this on an angle like this. or get down to the bottom, but we'll see how I get on. If I need to, that's why I've put the gloves on. I can just use my finger to kind of smear it a little bit after I've got it vaguely in the right place. Like I was saying before, this isn't how to do it, this is how I'm doing it. And there's probably much better ways of doing this. Feel free to mention them in the comments. It's good to learn off people. Probably could have done with a bigger hole cut on it, but never mind. I don't want to go crazy with it either. I did clean and dry it before doing this as well, by the way. And definitely use gloves. There's quite a few warnings on the tub about it. Yeah, there's a tip. Definitely make a bigger hole in the application tube. Now I think that's on fairly evenly all round, so I'm going to go ahead and get the thermostat on. Get it kind of lined up like that. See if the bolts line up. Okay, let me nip those up. There we go. It's in. A little bit has come out, so I'm going to clean that off, and then I'm going to leave that to cure for an hour. Then it just needs another slight nip to tighten it up according to the instructions, and then it should seal up quite nicely, and that should solve our problem. So there you go. That's hopefully the water seal fixed, or the water leak I should say fixed on the Corsa. Finally this time. I really hope this is sorted. So I'm going to let that dry, get some more proper coolant in it, run it up to temperature and make sure we don't have any water leaks. But thanks for watching. Like I say, please do put a comment down the bottom about what I was mentioning earlier, about what you think about the videos, whether there should be a how-to or whether I just do a bit of a chatter like this one and give a few vague bits and pieces of what I'm up to. Love to know what you think, but otherwise I'll see you in the next video.